When approaching Abinskaya, Paskiv established communication with Tiger. We were informed that there was no enemy in the air. The group began patrolling, using a pendulum sweep of the front line from Novorossiysk to the village of Kievskaya and back. Visibility is excellent. Far to the west, in about 30 minutes, a group of enemy fighters appeared. It was clear that she went to clear the battlefield, or to restrain us, and provide freedom of action for bombers to strike. So soon there should be junkers. I decided to warn Tiger and Paskiv about it. A group of fighters is approaching from the west. Bombers will be here soon. Paskiv, I'll attack the fighters. With the wingman, Sasha Golubev went towards the 6 Messerschmitts. In a few seconds the battle will begin. But, not accepting our frontal attack, Mi-109 turned aside and, stretching into a column of pairs, began to go around us. We left turn with a descent rush to the last pair. Yes, it seems that the enemy was experienced. Messers went sharply down from under our blow. The excess over them was small, and the battle turned out to be on oblique turns and combat turns. At one of the moments of this air carousel, I gave a machine gun line on the Mi-109. He just from a combat turn tried to go into the tail of Golubev's plane. The trace of glowing bullets hit the back of the enemy fighter. He flipped over and went steeply to the ground. The rest of the Messerschmitts immediately went to the side. After a moment I realized that I was shooting with a large overload and did not have time to press the button of the cannon. Too bad. The shells would have blown the enemy plane to pieces. I look around in the air. I see 2 9U-88s under us. They managed to come up while we were fighting with the fighters. Paskiv, attack the bombers. Paskiev, where are you? The bombers are approaching Krimskaya. I'm shouting over the radio. There's silence in reply. Then I decided to attack the bombers with my pair, to do everything to make them drop bombs on their troops. Dropped the plane into a steep dive and aimed at the leader of the rear group. There he is in the crosshairs. The line blows through him. Immediately I go uphill. Again dive, now on the leader of the first 9. Golubev holds on to me. On the way out of the attack saw 4 Messers. They attacked a couple of our Cobras. Those became a defensive circle, difficult, apparently I glanced at the bombers, they're turning to the west, so we've accomplished our main task, now to help our fighters. I make a sharp maneuver, approaching the group. I fired on the Mi-109s and went ahead of our pair. Join me on my right bearing and gain altitude. I gave the command. Having stopped the pursuit, Messerschmitts fell aside. On the turn, I examined the rear hemisphere. I see only 2. Where are the rest of our planes? Where is Golubev? No matter how much I turned my head, no one saw. Missed 3 planes. The enemy in the air, too, there was no. Fuel is already at the limit. We need to go home. We return to the airfield, and anxiety for the fate of the 3 pilots is growing. Of Paskiv's unit is missing 2. We will have to deal with after landing. And what happened to Golubev? We could only guess. Most likely the wingmen, carried away by the attack on the bombers, did not notice my energetic turn to help a couple of Paskiv's unit, broke away from me or continued to attack the U-88. In this case, he could have been picked up by the Messerschmitts. After landing, I immediately asked Vakhnenko if Golubev had landed. He and Kozlov did not sit down. The technician waved his hands. By the time they had already run out of fuel. It's hard on the soul. Young pilots could be shot down. That's why they did not respond to requests on the radio. And where is Paskiv? Over there by his plane. He landed without a circle, in a straight line. Smoke was billowing from the airplane like from a steam locomotive chimney. I approached Paskiv's plane. A group of technicians had already gathered around him. What happened? What are the arguments about? Here we're dealing with Paskiv's plane. Apparently drove on afterburner and burned the engine, explained squadron engineer Kopilov. Not true. The engine began to malfunction even over Krimskaya. That's why I left for Krasnodar, justified Paskiv. I looked carefully at Paskiv. Why did he abandon his link? Paskiv stood confused, averted his eyes. I called him aside. "Comrade Captain, why did you leave the battle and abandon the unit? Where is Kozlov?" "I've already said that the temperature of water and oil began to rise rapidly. I couldn't fight on a defective airplane. I had to go to the airfield." "Where's Kozlov?" "I don't know. When I left, he stayed with the wingman." I see Paskiv's wingman Savin standing nearby. I called him over. "Tell me in detail how the battle went." The pilot answered thoroughly, and everything became clear. When two 9U-88s, covered by four Mi-109s, approached Krimskaya, Paskiv suddenly made a U-turn and went eastward with a descent, with smoke from engine forcing. The wingmen were confused and unorganized began to attack the bombers. Kozlov, the young leader of the pair, rushed to the rear nine. The wingman lagged behind and could not protect him. A pair of Messerschmitts covering the bombers attacked Kozlov and shot him down. He ejected from the plane with a parachute. After the battle, 4 Messerschmitts, leaving the bombers uncovered, piled on the young, still untrained pilots seeking to eat easy prey. My appearance, a blow to the leading 4, saved our pilots. But how Sasha Golyubov, an experienced pilot, died remained unknown. He was a good, clear-headed fighter. I felt behind him as a shield. I knew that he would cover, would not let the enemy hit from behind, stealthily. The deep pain in my soul for my comrade in arms was stored forever. I reported to Zayev about our combat flight. Frankly said that Paskiv did not justify himself as a deputy. He can't lead a group in combat. He is psychologically broken, will ruin himself and other pilots. But the regiment commander did not agree with my conclusions. He motivated it by the fact that the only case of his unsatisfactory work is known so far, and perhaps the engine on the plane was really defective. In general, everything remained the same. However, I decided not to let Paskiv on combat missions in the next few days. It was necessary to give the pilot a chance to recover from the trauma. The bitterness about the dead pilots lay on my heart. It called for battle, caused rage, and the combat situation was becoming more and more tense. Soon the regiment lost another young pilot. In a heavy battle with a large group of U-87s, covered by Mi-109 fighters, 6 under the command of Vadim Fadiv shot down 3 bombers and 2 fighters. Junior Lieutenant Mamatov was killed in the battle. Victory over the experienced enemy was achieved by blood. However, with each flight and with each battle the young pilots became more and more experienced, made fewer mistakes and won more often. That day Fadiv's 4 pilots flew to combat missions in the early morning. There were 2 young pilots in the group. When flying to the front line, Fadiv contacted the command post by radio. "Tiger, I am Beard. I'm going to work. Report the air situation. An enemy group is approaching. Be attentive." Vadim Fadiv took the call sign Beard. This call sign corresponded to his appearance. When you hear it, you immediately imagine Vadim's smiling face with an impressive shovel beard. "Tiger, I'm Beard. I see the enemy. Attack." A group of U-88s covered by Messerschmitts was attacked from above. The attack was successful. 2 enemy machines caught fire. Having lost the leading Mi-109 and the leader of the group of bombers, the enemy planes turned to the west with a descent. U-88 was shot down by one of the young pilots. It was his first victory. A little later on, a combat mission flew out and my 8 patrolled at high speeds, pendulum method. Soon we encountered a dozen Mi-109s. In a difficult battle, and there were several young pilots in the group, we shot down 3 Messers. With the same composition in the evening, we had a fight with 8 German fighters. We shot down 5 Mi-109s. In these 2 battles, I destroyed 3 enemy planes. Young pilots fought bravely, assertively. So in battles, future aces were born. Analyzing the actions of enemy fighters, I came to the conclusion they began to come to the front line at a higher altitude than before. It became more difficult to fight. The fact that we were flying without oxygen also had an impact. Even with a small overload on the maneuver darkened in the eyes. This put us at a disadvantage relative to the enemy. And not only in combat, but also in search. At high altitude, experiencing oxygen starvation, our pilots entered the battle already tired. This could not be allowed in the future. After all, there was everything to ensure flights at high altitudes. Carelessness on the part of the engineering staff of the regiment and the command of the Battalion of Airfield Service. Our airplanes were simply not charged with oxygen. After thinking it all over, I decided to take action. In the evening, met with the regiment's weapons engineer Jean Mudem. I started the conversation, as they say, without diplomacy. Why aren't our planes charged with oxygen? The enemy began to fly higher, and we cannot fight with them without oxygen. There were no instructions to charge airplanes with oxygen. If it is required, we will take measures. If tomorrow there's no oxygen in the planes, the pilots will give you personally a sabanchu. Agreed, Alexander Ivanovich. The oxygen will be there. Of course, everything was not so simple. It was necessary to organize the delivery of cylinders with oxygen to the airfield, carefully check all the stages of refueling, check and constantly maintain the system in the aircraft. But to the honor of the technical staff should be said that even this task was solved successfully. The next day we flew with oxygen masks. The pilots' well-being at high altitudes became normal, which means that they are able to fight more decisively. Combat life posed other problems. Ammunition and shells were calculated taking into account the rate of fire of each type of weapon for 8 seconds of continuous firing. An experienced pilot, and this, as a rule, a good shooter, air sniper, simultaneously used all weapons, machine guns and cannon. He could shoot down up to 3 or 4 enemy planes in one sortie. However, the first battles showed that the powerful cannon were used poorly. We often returned after a long battle with unspent cannon ammunition. The main reason was the inconvenient location of the trigger. It was on top of the airplane control knob. To press it, you had to twist the palm of your hand. This interfered with the process of aiming. But it had a particularly negative effect when firing on piloting with overloads. The control of all weapons had to be redesigned to bring the gun trigger to the machine guns. I once had a conversation on this issue with engineer Jean Mudem. Soon you will have to store shells, I told him. How to store them? I don't understand you. And you ask yourself why the pilots from the battle bring all or almost all the shells and machine gun containers are empty. I still can't understand why pilots don't use the cannon much in combat, and the gunners report about it. I told them that it's inconvenient to press the gun button when firing, and advised to think about what can be done. As an experiment on my airplane, change the release of all weapons to a machine gun trigger. But, according to the manual, you can't do that. My dear engineer, the pilots fight, not the designer. Change it immediately on my plane, and then on the fighters of our squadron. We'll thank you for that. Apparently, I convinced the engineer. Now I'll gather the technical staff, we'll think over the scheme, determine the scope of work. I think it can be done. But you take care of the conversation with your superiors. Soon I tried firing the trigger. Everything worked well. In the future we had no problems with this issue. A few days later, having worked the task of covering the troops on the front line, the regiment relocated to a dried-up dirt airfield near the village Popovicheskaya. Here already stood the 45th Air Regiment of our division. And in the village settled the headquarters of the compound. The quiet village was filled with military men with aviation insignia. The pilots were accommodated in huts drowning in blossoming fruit trees. After Krasnodar, the conditions here were, as they say, terraced. We soon forgot our accommodation in a dilapidated warehouse. There we froze at night. The rest of the soldiers, tired in the battles, was disturbed by bomb explosions. They were often dropped by single night bombers, and anti-aircraft gunners firing at night interfered. But here it's different. Soon after the relocation, I went to the battalion headquarters. This time, on purely personal matters, I tried to find out if there was no data on the location of the military unit in which Maria should serve. I never gave up hope that she, like me, was also somewhere in the Cuban. But the messages were not encouraging. There was no such military unit in the vicinity. In the free time between flights and in the evenings I was thinking about her fate. It seemed very distant that day when, parting, we'd promised to remain true to our feelings. And why didn't she write as we had agreed? I had no doubts about our mutual fidelity. I firmly knew that Masha was waiting for our meeting. We had a real and serious feeling, and it is not afraid of separation. It remained only to believe and wait. I was convinced that the combat situation, with its suffering and blood, sharpened in the soldiers such qualities as decency, a sense of friendship and loyalty. I have always had a deep dislike for those who offended, humiliated the dignity and decency of women warriors. One must believe in better feelings. On the second day after the flight to Popovitcheskaya, the weather did not allow us to take off on a combat mission in the morning. The multi-layered low clouds and fine rain pressed us to the airfield. By the middle of the day the clouds lifted, and I was assigned to patrol in the Krimskaya area. In this direction, as we were informed, the enemy ground units from early morning launched a counterattack on our 56th Army, prepared for an offensive. With the improvement of the weather was expected massive use of enemy air forces. We were ordered to thwart enemy airstrikes, to help our ground troops. The first to fly out on the fighters Kitty Hawk 8 of the 45th Air Regiment. Later we went into the sky, and we 6. I took a young pilot, Ivan Savin, as my wingman. On the flight route I contacted the command center. Tiger reacted immediately. 3 9U-87s are coming to Krasnodar. Cover the city. The order was accepted, and we took a new course. Halfway there we found 8 Messerschmitts below us. I realized they wouldn't let us through without a fight. The decision matured instantly. I'm Pokrishkin, 10 o'clock, 30 degrees below Messers. Attack. Rechkalov, cover. Passing over a group of Messerschmitts, vigorously entering the dive, the method of falcon strike, attacked. At close range, I hit the Me-109 with all my weapons. It immediately burst into flames. The Messerschmitts scrambled. Some went up, but their Rekhakarlov's pair struck them and shot down the second machine. The rest, pressed to the ground, in disorder rushed to the west. On the second approach, I suddenly heard the voice of my wingman. I'm Savin, I'm attacking. Cover, cover. I understood the excitement of the young fighter, his desire to distinguish himself in the battle, to prove that he was worthy to be a fighter. Having stopped my maneuver, I decided to help Savin and informed him that I was covering him. The first turn on Me-109 he made from a long distance. It missed the target because of his haste. Savin, calm down. Come closer and shoot. The command had a sobering effect on the young fighter. Having approached 100 meters, he set fire to the Me-109 with a short burst. Well done, Savin. Join me. He acted as all young fighters do. Even experienced pilots sometimes make mistakes in determining the range to the enemy aircraft. In those small seconds of attack, it seems that the target is very close. That's when the wings of the enemy aircraft will fit into the sighting ring. Then you can open fire. The enemy is at killing range, but all this comes with experience. Preparing to attack again, I heard a command. I'm Tiger. Everyone immediately go to Krasnodar. Escaping Messers are a good target, but the order must be strictly obeyed. Having stopped the pursuit, we took the direction to the city. At the approach to Krasnodar, we saw in the breaks of clouds groups of bombers. They were going westward between the tiers of clouds. They were pursued by a group of the neighbouring regiment, which flew out before us. We were much lower, had not yet gained altitude after the fight with the Messerschmitts. It was inexpedient to chase the bombers, they would leave anyway. Besides, we were bound by the order of Tiger. We made a few circles. There is no enemy in the air. I decided to go to Krimskaya. In the area of Abinskaya, we tried to attack in the tail of 4 Me-109s, but we found them in time. I gave the command to turn all of a sudden, deciding to go into a frontal attack. The leading Messerschmitt, pressed from above by clouds, took on a vertical line of sight with a large preemptive and let through the path of fire. Messer piled on the wing and went to the ground. The remaining trio quickly dived into the clouds and disappeared. It was felt that the fire of all weapons with accurate aiming justified itself. It was very convenient to shoot, having one common for guns and machine guns trigger. We turned to Krimskaya and suddenly found a Kitty Hawk fighter in the air. He was travelling alone. Apparently broke away from the group of the 45th Air Regiment. We can't leave it behind. A loner easy prey for Messerschmitts. I ordered him to join our 6, and as it turned out, it was done in time. In a few seconds we met a large group of enemy fighters. The fight began. Such a merry-go-round started in the air that you had to keep your eyes open. At one of the moments of air battle in the tail of Kitty Hawk was Me-109. He rushed to the rescue, with the Messer in his sights and the Kitty Hawk ahead. A powerful burst could kill them both. I turn off the gun toggle switch and hit the enemy plane with a machine gun burst. Just as I was turning around, I turned on the cannon switch. Then and Me-109 rushed past me, attacking the Cobra. I made a deep turn with a big overload. I catch the enemy plane in my sights. Opened fire. The trace went lower. Holy shit. Pressed against the seat by the overload, I was below the line of sight. That's why I missed. I quickly leaned back against the back of the seat, back to the line of sight. I'm not letting go of the enemy. I'm following him. Only at 30 meters I missed the engine and cockpit of the Me-109. He's finished. The pilot was killed and crashed into the ground with the plane. The enemy, having lost several Messerschmitts shot down, went into the clouds. We can't go home. The time of patrolling is not over yet. Even having used up ammunition in 3 fights, the group continued to protect the city. We realized that we could prevent the enemy bombers from striking and raise the offensive spirit of our troops on the ground. Kryukov's group came to replace us. Now we can safely go to their airfield. But it turned out that it was easier to shoot down 9 Messers in the air than to convince the officers of the division headquarters. Something you are confused there, immediately interrupted the duty officer on the phone report. Shot down 9, did not lose a single one. Count again. I did not try to convince anyone. I was about to leave the command post of the regiment. Suddenly there was a call from above. It turned out that our battle was observed from the front of the commander of the Air Force Front, General Vershinin. He announced a commendation to all pilots of the 6. He ordered to present me with the Order of the Red Banner for 4 downed enemy fighters. His call and confirmed our report. I will not hide, I was pleased with the success of the unit. In the battle bravely and assertively acted young pilots. Practical lesson in combat, personally shot down enemy planes, raised their morale, confidence in their abilities, helped in the formation of air fighters. Victories inspired them to new feats. Skillfully and boldly performed their tasks and other pilots. Kryukov's squadron, which replaced our group on patrol, also distinguished itself that day. Having met with 4 Messerschmitts, the pilots bravely entered the battle. Kryukov shot down 3 Me-109s. This battle also saw General Vershinin. He announced to Pavel Pavlovich Kryukov gratitude and ordered to present him for awarding the Order of the Red Banner. When the link landed, I immediately went to P. Krukov. Pal Palik, I congratulate you on the successful results and the upcoming award. Tell me how the fight went. After you left, 4 Me-109s tried to attack us, but we rushed at them ourselves. Soon they began to run away. I shot down 3 Messers in succession. Well done. And how did the young ones act? This time worse than you'd expect. They broke away from me and stayed far behind. If they had been near me, the 4th Messer wouldn't have gotten away. We once again, already in more detail, began to analyze the dynamics of the battle. We spoke frankly, not hesitating to express our conclusions to each other. P. Kryukov was an experienced pilot. He understood that analyzing mistakes, even in a brilliantly conducted battle, is very important. I think it's your own fault that the young men lagged behind. I know you well. You have a bulldog-like grip on your opponent's tail. I guess you forget about your wingman. If you drive the plane at top speed or make a maneuver, the wingman will surely fall behind. And that can lead to loss of control of the group. Young people will be killed. P. Krukov listened attentively. He could not deny the ability to self-critically assess their actions. Unfortunately, during the battle he sometimes lost control of himself, forgot preliminary decisions. This put his partners in a difficult situation, but when analysed, he agreed with the harshest conclusions. "You're right, but in this battle, the Messers would have gotten away. My advice for the future: you sometimes complain that your wingmen abandon you, or maybe you create such conditions yourself." "All right, Sasha. I'll keep these conclusions in mind." Soon after talking to Krukov, our group took off. We went as a 6. I took Paskiv as my wingman. We had to involve him in the fighting. There is still hope to restore his fighting qualities. Before the flight, I had a quiet talk with my deputy. "You'll fly on my plane. It works perfectly. Your task is to cover me in battle. Stay close to me. If you're attacked, I'll help you out." When approaching Krimskaya, I first heard on the radio, and soon saw the air battle of B, Glinka's group with fighters. Glinka with enemy fighters. They came to clear the battlefield. I realized that this was a precursor to the imminent appearance of bombers. The task of my 6 to intercept them, to disrupt the strike on our troops. I warned my pilots. "I'm Pokrishkin, at 3 o'clock, 0 degrees combat. Be attentive, we're gaining altitude." Immediately after this warning, Paskiv made a turn and dive disappeared in the direction of Krasnodar. I tried to get him back in line, but he didn't even respond. At that moment, I will not hide, I was terribly angry with him. There were 5 of us left. There are 3 young pilots in the group. It will be difficult to fight, but it is better to be in fewer numbers than to have an unreliable partner. You rely on him, he'll let you down. There was no time to be indignant. From the west showed a column of 3-9 bombers U-87, covered by fighter escorts. We went to meet them. Passing under the first 9, I Falcon strike attacked the leading. From the powerful trace of the bomber broke in half. I went up to take the initial position for a new strike on the second 9. I see a burning U-87 falling to the ground, and the others, having dropped bombs on the location of their troops, in disorder turned to the west. It was a favourable position to pursue and destroy them one by one. However, the situation changed not in our favour. Appeared 6Me-109, with a move rushed at us. The middle pair of our young pilots, which earlier covered me during the attacks of bombers, became in a defensive circle and fought off the Messers. We had to rescue them immediately. The leader of our third pair, Rekolov, successfully hit me 109. I also rushed to the enemy. This forced the remaining 5 Messerschmitts to get out of the battle and then leave in the western direction. In the combat, sortie managed to shoot down only 3 enemy aircraft. Given the total contribution, they were divided among our 3 pairs, but the burned enemy machines is the second thing. The main thing, the group did not allow the bombers to hit the ground troops. The combat task was accomplished. I reported to Zayev on the results of the combat sortie. "Why did Paskiv left?" asks the regiment commander. "It is difficult for me to say anything," I answered uncertainly. I did not want to now, as they say, under the hot hand to decide the fate of a man. For leaving the battlefield must be judged. But Paskiv must first be examined by doctors. Maybe his psyche is disturbed. Let's look into it later. While flying home, I thought over, in my opinion, a useful proposal for the use of our groups in the upcoming battles. I expressed it to the commander of the unit. It is necessary to fly 3 or 4 units at the same time. The enemy began to make massive strikes. A weak group of 4 or 6 fighters to repel such a blow is impossible. The regiment commander seemed to agree with me, but when he began to set the task for the next combat flight, suddenly made amendments. "Having finished refueling planes, you will fly 8. The first will go Normenko's wing of 4 airplanes, and you and your link will take to the air in 30 minutes, increasing the efforts of the first group. The second pair in your squadron will fly Krukov." "Comrade Commander, you can't do that. I will not have time to take off, as the link Normenko already burned. And then mine. Normenko is a young commander. He's never led a group on his own. Allow me to fly 8 at once. Execute the order." What was I supposed to do? Argue with the regiment commander? Normenko's wing took to the air. The pilots of my group ordered to sit in the airplanes with radios on and wait for the command to take off. I listened attentively to Normenko's negotiations with the Tiger. I listened and became more and more worried. The situation in the area of Krymskaya, judging by radio traffic, was threatening. 15 minutes after the takeoff, Normenko, I could not stand it, gave the command to take off. Immediately led the unit to the area of cover. Over Krymskaya already accumulated about 100 U-88s. When we approached, the last 9 were coming in for bombing. The platoon rushed to the attack. We had to prevent them from dropping bombs. I aimed at the 9 Junkers, which became on a combat course. In seconds the bombs would fall. We were in a hurry. Smoke trails stretched out from the gunners' cabins towards us, creating diving high angular velocity for the gunners. I take in the sight of the leading plane. Here he is near. I'm taking my turn. Attacking, I didn't notice how Krukov broke away from me. He rushed at the bombers in the middle of the column. Only I had time to shoot down the leader when I heard Arkady Fedorov's voice. Pokrishkin messes in the tail. Go away. I reacted instantly and got out from under the attack of 4 Mi-109s. And then me and Fedorov, my wingman, spun with them. We could not break through to the bombers now. After landing, we began to sort out who didn't return. A far-fetched flight with building up of forces brought losses. Normenko and his wingman were shot down. Kryukov, who decided to act independently in the battle, was shot down, as well as his wingman. They landed forcibly in the field. The flight once again confirmed the truth: you cannot fly in small groups. You cannot include in one group of equal in position superiors. This led to the defeat of a pair of Kryukov, put me and Fedorov in a difficult situation. The death of Normenko caused pain in the soul, burning resentment at the irresponsibility of some comrades, which before the flight I warned in the inevitable failure. Another combat day is behind us. It began with a brilliant victory and ended with the death of combat comrades. With Nikolai Normenko I flew often. Not once fought with superior enemy forces. I strived to make him a good commander. He was an honest and brave fighter. In the last combat flight he, knowing that he was sure to be shot down, bravely rushed into the attack on the armada of enemy aircraft. This pilot fulfilled his sacred duty as a fighter to the end. Approaching the command post of the regiment, met the commander of our air army, General Normenko, greeted him. Pokrishkin, why are you so angry? He asked after saying hello. Comrade General, you can't fight like we did today. What are you dissatisfied with? Be more specific. The fact that we are fighting with outstretched fingers. We cover our troops from the enemy's powerful airstrikes with separate 4s or 6s. Tell me, how do you think we should act? Let's go for a walk and talk. I knew General Normenko well. Under his personal leadership, I had to perform special tasks, more than once to talk to him. I knew that he treated me with trust. His attention disposed to a frank conversation. Told the commander about observations of enemy actions, expressed an opinion on how to better organize the coverage of objects on the front line. Analyzing the actions of the air enemy shows that he makes massive strikes by bombers 2 or 3 times a day, and beforehand sends up to 12 or more Messerschmitts. They have the purpose to bind our patrolling group, to restrain it. Our fighters in these conditions cannot always disrupt the strike bombers. In the expected time, raids should be sent to cover 2 or 3 independent groups of fighters, 6 or better 8 aircraft each. This will require, of course, an increase in combat sorties. However, all pilots, and I talked to many on this issue, approve of this option. They agree to fly twice as much as they do now. This is understandable. Pilots strive to successfully perform combat missions. In order to have a firm confidence that the enemy bombers flew out, apparently should be reconnaissance and eavesdropping on enemy radio traffic in the air. General Normenko I told in detail about the last battle. I did not hide the fact that the squadron lost 2 pilots due to an unwise decision to use the build-up of forces in the battle. Well, thank you for your frankness. It's a good idea. We'll think about your suggestions. I realize that we can't expect drastic changes at once. It would take time. And the environment doesn't wait. We have to look for new techniques ourselves. In the morning, the regiment commander set a combat mission to fly the first group of Fadiv in 8 planes, and my 6 to replace him in 40 minutes. To be all the time over Krimskaya, and that not a single bomb fell on our heads. Understood? Strictly asked Zaev. Vadim and I replied that everything is clear, and went to the parking lot. On the way we clarified our actions. Vadim, I am ready to come to Krimskaya earlier than Zaev has set. If necessary, of course. Your job is to keep the cleanup team in check. I'll intercept the bombers. If it's difficult, radio me immediately. I'll help you. Okay, Sasha. It's a deal. The first group took off. Pilots of my 6 sat in the airplanes and turned on the radios. I also listened attentively to the air. About 20 minutes later, I heard Fadiev's voice. I beard. I see 8 masses. Prepare for battle. It was a command to take off my group. While we're flying, the bombers will come up. Here is the Crimea. Fadiv's group is fighting with Messerschmitts to our right. Beard. I'm Pokrishkin. How are you? Everything's all right. 3 of them are already down. Need a hand? We'll manage on our own. Do as we planned. Ahead, to the left and below, to the front edge were sneaking 39 U-87 dive bombers, covered by 4 fighters. They went in column one after another at a distance of up to 1 kilometre. Retchkalov, cover. The 4 of us will attack the bombers. Understood. I'm covering. We'll dive on the first 9. I'm catching the leading one. There he is, right next to me. I can see the crosses. A fierce burst and the U-87s are in shreds. On the right side of the 9, the second one caught fire from Berezhny's Q. We see that bombs from the Junkers have fallen. Good, because the enemy's defence is below, and the bombers scattered, diving turned to the west. In a second strike on the second 9, I shot down another U-87. The pattern repeated itself. The enemy pilots dropped their bombs and went west in panic. The third 9, seeing the fate of the front, not waiting for our strike, dropped bombs and turned to their airfield. I managed to catch up with another U-87 and with a long burst to bring it down to the ground. Retchkalov's pair, having shot down a Mi-109, spun around with 3 Messerschmitts. It was impossible to pursue the fleeing bombers in these conditions. We must help Retchkalov. Having seen us, Messerschmitts left the battle. I gathered the group in combat order, went to Fadiv. And here the same picture. Having found the backup, the Messerschmitts dive out of the battle. There was no enemy in the air. Fadiev's group must go to the airfield. Beard. I'm Pokrishkin. Congratulations on your victory. I'll take your place. I'll do it. We've combed the skinny ones well. I wish you success. In this battle, our 2 groups shot down 11 airplanes together without suffering losses. I guess that's how you build up your forces during a battle. But after landing, I got a slap from Zaev for premature departure. Comrade Commander, if I had delayed, we wouldn't have carried out your order. The bombs would have fallen on the heads of our troops, I replied. That only justifies you. No more a woe. Yes, Comrade Commander. Later, on the results of the battle, the division headquarters staff decided to double-check. They could not believe that you can shoot down 11 enemy planes and not lose their own. They contacted the command center of the ground forces. The deputy commander of the front reported that he personally observed the air battle of our groups from the front line, saw how the burning enemy vehicles fell. On this day, the offensive of our troops to break through the powerful enemy defences in the direction of the village of Krimskaya exhausted. 56th Army, having little artillery and an insignificant number of tanks, could only wedge into the Blue Line defence. Strong counterattacks and massive airstrikes disrupted the offensive. There was a lull at the front, and in the regiment continued combat work. The air became calmer. The enemy almost did not use bombers. Fights were held only with small groups of enemy fighters. They appeared at high altitudes in search of easy prey. Once, patrolling in the Krimskaya area, I decided to teach these profit-seekers a lesson. In previous sorties, I noticed their attempts to attack our groups of bombers and fighter escorts after the fulfillment of the combat mission during the withdrawal. During our patrol below us were finishing bombing 39P2s. I led my group to the west, gaining altitude. I realized that our bombers were already entering their territory. I gave the command to turn around. The group followed them with a steep descent. The calculations were justified. Hitler's hunters were already creeping up from behind to our P2s. Passionate about pursuit, the enemy pilots did not notice us. At high speed, we came close to the Messers. A short attack and won me 109 turned from hunter to game. The second Messerschmitt dodged from under the blow of Savin, my wingman. Peaking to the ground, the enemy went away. We couldn't pursue him. We would lose altitude, and we needed it for patrolling. We returned to the area covered by us with a combat turn, and soon went to the airfield. The result, although not great, but still one of Hitler's aces, will not return to their own. Toward evening, I was called to the command post. Zayev set the task to fly out immediately and at the airfield of Taganrog to burn the Yak-1 airplane. It is necessary to destroy it, he emphasized. There is to destroy the Yak. I go to the plane and think, how could our fighter be on the enemy airfield? How much trouble such an airplane can do in the hands of the enemy? Over Taganrog airfield, we jumped out at low altitude. We realized that we would succeed by surprise. We carefully inspected the runway, parking lots. Yak was not. The enemy anti-aircraft gunners became alarmed, opened fire. Our small group responded with an assault and went home. Failure bothered me. A year ago, I flew the Mi-109 on special missions. And now I was sure that the enemy was using the Yak to his advantage. I had to be alert. I also wondered how our machine had ended up with the enemy. Only after landing I found out the story. The case is ridiculous and criminal on the part of P2 pilots. They were leading a group of Yaks flying from the Far East to the Kuban. Having lost orientation in difficult weather conditions, the P2 led the fighters instead of Rostov to Taganrog. As it later became known, the squadron commander was the first to go down. Having turned off the engine, he began to calmly direct the landing of the rest of the pilots of the group by radio. Only after the landing of the second airplane our pilots saw Hitlerites running to them. The pilot of the second airplane immediately took off, but on gaining altitude he was shot down by anti-aircraft fire. The squadron commander shot back to the end. He preferred death to captivity. The last shot was left to himself. On April 17, 1943, the enemy, taking advantage of the suspension of our troops' offensive at Krimskaya, undertook a powerful attack on Myskako. This piece of land, called Malaya Zemlya, was captured in early February by a sea landing under the command of Caesar Kunikov. Striving to throw the landing into the Black Sea, Hitlerites concentrated southwest of Novorossiysk large forces of ground troops, but they were timely revealed by our aviation reconnaissance. To disrupt the enemy's offensive, the command redirected the actions of all aviation in the area of Malaya Zemlya. Fighter units were to cover the landing from enemy aircraft, to accompany bombers and attack aircraft when they struck at the advancing German troops. Early in the morning, the commander ordered me as part of the four to accompany the bombers. The same task was given to Dmitry Glinka. P2 approached the airfield in a column of nines at a distance of 300 meters. With this formation of the combat order bombers flew in one group. I was surprised by this arrangement of fighters. What purpose was pursued by the division command, allocating independent fours from different regiments to accompany the virtually single group of bombers? It was not in favor of the cause. Combat experience has repeatedly proved the inexpediency of such a decision. Groups of fighters from different regiments in such cases acted uncoordinated in combat, and therefore uncover the bombers performed poorly. On the approach to Tsimiskaya Bay, we were met by Messerschmitts. Glinka his four began to gain altitude, where soon engaged in battle with enemy fighters. The escort group in all cases goes together with the bombers and does not allow them to attack enemy fighters. Now my four would have to guard his 9 and 9, for which Glinka was responsible. Pawns were still on a combat course when towards us from the west appeared enemy bombers U-88 and U-87. They were at the same altitude as we were. Between Novorossiysk and Anapa there was a rendezvous. I and my wingman without leaving the pawns, went into a frontal attack. Aiming at the nose cockpit junkers, tried to shoot the pilots. Our bombers also fired from the front machine guns enemy planes. This counterfight lasted a little over a minute. Our attack somewhat upset the combat order of the enemy armada, but it was not possible to determine how many planes were shot down in a counterfight. It was necessary to search, be on the lookout, because there could be Messerschmitts. We waited for our nines to turn home, but they, strictly following the flight order, kept the course in the western direction. To our right, just ahead of us, the enemy airfield in Anapa. Jets of dust can be seen above the runway. It took off German fighters. Now we will have to fight with them. Only at the traverse of Anapa bombers went into a gentle left turn toward the sea. At a distance of 15 kilometers from the coast, pawns began to reverse course. But at the turn from the line lagged right extreme. Almost every 9. This added to our troubles. And then came the German fighters. There was an air battle over the sea. Fighting off the attacks of Messerschmitts, and in some moments of manoeuvring, I cast a glance down at the sea. Large circles can be seen on the water. So, someone crashed into the waves. Their own or enemy planes? There's no time to figure it out. Everything will be clear at the airfield. And now we have to rescue 2 pawns that have broken away from the formation. 2 Fokkers were already tailing them. They decided to get an easy prey. I make a sharp turn. The wingman is not lagging behind. We dive into the tail of the Fokkers. They, carried away by the attack, do not notice us. Now who's ahead of who? We got into firing range earlier than they did. Powerful fire of our pair of all-machine guns and cannons thwarted the attacks of Focke-Wulf 190. I see on the water appeared new circles. This fell into the sea Fokkers. Soon I noticed the leader of our top pair, Ershoff. He was descending, on a smoking airplane, going in the direction of the airfield Gelendzhik. He was shot down. Up remained his wingman. He is alone. It's difficult for him. Several Messers are attacking. I make a vertical slide and immediately hit the Me-109. He was already in the tail of our fighter. Finally we crossed Tsemskaya Bay. The air became calmer. I counted the pawns all intact, 3 of us too. How's Ershoff? Looking ahead, I'll tell you that by the evening we reported that the pilot had safely landed on the shot-down airplane. After landing, I went to Glinka. I wanted to talk to him about this combat flight. Dmitri, why did you leave your 9 pawns and stayed over Novorossiysk? Who was supposed to cover the bombers? You saw it yourself. We started a fight with a group of Messers and broke away. That's no excuse. I could have left the pawns and joined the fight. Then the bombers would have been shot down. Sasha, let's not start a quarrel. Your remarks are correct. I'll keep them in mind for the future. Good. Let's consider the matter closed. Soon followed another combat sortie to the area of Muskako to escort 2 9P2s. My group of 6 airplanes was assigned as a strike group. We were assigned the task to shackle the enemy's cover fighters. Direct escort was entrusted to the 4D. Glinka. Over Novorossiysk we met 12 Me-109. Having an excess, we attacked the Messers from the start. The enemy, numerically superior to us, took the fight. The fight was fierce. However, a pair of Iskrin shot down 2 Me-109s. Then I lit one, Fediv and Trud 2 more. This stifled the enemy's activity. Having lost a couple more planes, a group of Messerschmitts draped off. By diving to the ground, left the patrol area. We went to the aid of our bombers. They, having turned around, were already heading back. The task was accomplished. But then a new group of enemy fighters appeared from the sea. It tried to break through to Petyakovy. Fighting off their attack, D. Glinka shot down an Me-109. Our group arrived in time. A sudden attack dispersed the others. In this flight, both our groups shot down about 10 airplanes, with no losses of either bombers or fighters. In the afternoon, the commander again set the task of escorting 2 9P2s. My group consisted of 6 airplanes. This time luck changed us. During the rearrangement, wingman Berezhny Sapunov, looking at the appeared over Novorossiysk Messerschmitts, hit the propeller of his plane on the tail of the fighter, leading and knocked him off the control rudders. Berezhnoi landed by parachute in the center of Tsmeskaya Bay. We could not help him from the shore, and we wouldn't have had time we were flying without life jackets. The pilots of the group at the site of this catastrophe became agitated and scattered in disorder. I had to intervene. I am Pokryshkin. All take your places. The combat order was restored. I decided what to do with the wingman. Should I give him a command to go to the airfield? It's dangerous. One of them will surely be shot down. It's scorching hot here now. Enemy fighters are like mosquitoes over a lake. It's hard to fly with us in a damaged airplane. There was no time to think long. We're about to fight with the messers. I asked on the radio. Sapunov, how's your plane? Everything is fine. I heard in reply. I could sense from his tone that he was very worried and discouraged. Calm down and join my pair. This time the flight went without serious contractions. Soon we went to our airfield. After landing, I approached Sapunov's plane. He was sitting in the cockpit and sobbing. With difficulty, I managed to calm him down. Of course, it is very hard to be guilty of the death of a comrade in arms. My heart was also scratching. Vladimir Berezhnoi was my pupil, a capable pilot. In the following days, in the sky above Malaya Zemlya, our forces were added. The pilots of the 3rd Aviation Corps arrived to Kuban and entered the battle. This unit was assigned the task of covering the area. It was commanded by E.Y. Savitsky, and our regiment provided combat operations of bombers and attack aircraft. One of the sorties in the area of Malaya Zemlya almost was the last for me. That time we flew 4 to escort L-2 attack aircraft in the middle of the day. After takeoff, I found out that the radio receiver on my airplane had failed. According to the instructions, I had to stop the flight and land. However, it was dangerous to leave a group of 3 fighters without a leader. I decided to continue the flight on a combat mission. When crossing the Tsmeskaya Bay, I passed at speed from the left side of the attack group to the right. Ahead was Novorossiysk. Just at these seconds, me and my wingman were attacked by a pair of Mi-109s. Urshov warned about the enemy by radio and spun with the Messer. I, of course, did not hear his signal. The leading Mi-109 managed to get into the tail of my plane. Intuition made me look back. Mi-109 was hovering in the tail in 50 meters. Abruptly through the plane with fully given rudders in a slanting roll. Ahead of the enemy for a moment, the entire firepath of the 3-gun Messerschmitt passed below the wing. The enemy was so close that through the noise of the engine I heard this cannon line. Apparently, the pilot of the Mi-109 thought I was shot down and without wasting time headed for the attack aircraft. I was seized with rage, and my wingman did not act in the best way in this flight. Abruptly took his plane out of an oblique turn and rushed after the Mi-109, clearly intoxicated with his success. Another moment, and the enemy in my sights. Probably in these seconds the fascist noticed the mortal danger. With an energetic flip, he leaves my sight and dives vertically to the water. I'm after him. The low altitude at which the battle took place did not allow him to break away. On the way out of the dive, he got in my sight again. 2 good bursts killed the Mi-109, and it went to the bottom of the bay, where only 2 minutes ago it was going to send me. With a combat turn, I regained altitude. Only at that moment I felt that I was wet with sweat. Yes, victory is not easy. Having attached Urshov to me, we went to escort the Ilovs. In that sortie, they made a powerful assault blow on Hitler's troops' accumulation. On April 20th, the enemy made desperate attempts to destroy our landing. In the air, the situation became even more heated. In the first sortie to escort a group of P2s, we took off as a trio. The leader of the second pair had a malfunction. In this flight, we managed to repel all the attacks of Messerschmitts, but the battle was complicated by a single P2 going below the group, damaged by anti-aircraft guns. On the return route, already approaching Novorossiysk, I saw 2 Focke-Wulf 190s tailing him. I and my wingman, Ivan Savin, dived down on them. The attack was lightning fast. We immediately shot down both of them. Apparently, the enemy pilots did not notice how they themselves became a target. After that, I jumped out to the group of our bombers, and Savin stayed to cover the P-2, which was shot down. That was going to the airfield to Gelendzhik. Having provided a safe landing of the bomber, Savin, despite my strict order to land at this airfield, decided to catch up with us. But practice has confirmed dozens of times a single plane is a sure target. Unfortunately, it turned out so. Savin was soon attacked by a pair of hunters and shot down in the foothills north of Gelendzhik. So we lost another very capable young pilot. The next day we again escorted 2 9P2s. We flew 6. Zaev ordered to include in our group Parskiv with wingman Stepan Verbitsky and assigned them the top pair in the combat order. After bombing, bombers on the traverse of Anapa began to turn toward the sea. Parskiv's pair somewhat broke away from our 4 and flew to the shore. I gave Parskiv a command to approach our group, and immediately I saw Formi 109 jumping out of the clouds. They were going to attack. Parskiv, behind the messers, turn on them and attack head-on. I gave the command and immediately went to help. Verbitsky, following orders, rushed to the 4 Messerschmitts. Parskiv dived under our group. 4 messers attacked a single plane, quickly set it on fire, and disappeared behind the clouds. Before our eyes, the wind blew Verbitsky on a parachute into the open sea. We could not help him in any way. After landing, the commander of the unit, having listened to my report on the course of the battle, asked, "What are we going to do?" When we were flying home, I couldn't get this case out of my head. How to explain that a pilot, a combat pilot in the past, behaves like this? Parskiv had fought bravely before he was shot down. Maybe the medics should check him out, although the act is disgusting, but we need to look at all sides. Soon at the medical commission, Parskiv really revealed serious abnormalities. Severe trauma has disturbed his psyche. Rarely, but it happened that the pilot after that could not cope with himself. Parskiev had to be thoroughly treated. Later he was transferred to the aviation communications and faithfully performed his tasks. This case spoke of many things. First of all, the need to have a strong hardening, be ready for all the vicissitudes of combat life. The onslaught of the enemy in the area of Myskako after 7 days of fierce fighting subsided. Paratroopers, showing unparalleled heroism, stubbornly held this piece of land, abundantly watered with their blood. The air situation also changed in our favor. Courageous actions of the Soviet aviation, its strengthening by aviation formations arriving in Kuban, strengthened the combat power of our Air Force in the North Caucasus. However, the enemy did not remain in debt. Soon I again had the task of escorting 2 9P2s to the Myskako area. When defining the group, I was persistently begged to take on a combat mission by a young pilot, Nikolai Ostrovsky. But at that moment he was still poorly prepared for the heavy fights that we fought here. Ostrovsky arrived in our regiment in the fall of the 42nd year after graduating from aviation school. We checked his flight training. It was, to put it mildly, not high. We began to train the young pilot. He studied diligently. One day I saw him crying, with a letter in his hands. "Ostrovsky," I asked, "what happened?" Nikolai handed me the letter. It informed that his mother, father, all brothers and sisters who remained on the occupied territory, Hitlerites, shot for connection with partisans. His pain was transmitted to me. Those fascist bastards. The time will come and will pay for everything. It's hard, comrade commander. I don't have any relatives left now. Consider me your father now, Kolya, and you're my own son now. Even before the events in the Myskako area, he flew a mission as a wingman. The battle was unsuccessful. Ostrovsky was left alone against a pair of experienced hunters. In a difficult battle he was shot down, but successfully landed, returned to the combat unit. We had to give him a few days' rest. Now he was eager to take to the skies again. His persistence won me over. I appointed him wingman in my pair. We flew as a foursome. The second pair was headed by Pavel Kryukov. After leaving the airfield, I noticed a jet of black smoke behind Ostrovsky's plane. He began to fall behind us. "Ostrovsky, what's wrong with your engine? Why are you lagging behind?" Nikolai was silent. He didn't answer repeated requests. Then I ordered him to return to the airfield. Not reaching the foothills of the Caucasus, Ostrovsky turned toward the airfield. Went home, order I decided. Bombers bombed and, as always, continued on a combat course almost to Anapa. Over the sea on the turn from the second 9 lagged behind the outer P2. I knew that in case of attack of enemy fighters it would be attacked first. That's why I flew next to him. At some point I looked at the 4 Messerschmitts that appeared on the left. At that time cannon traces of P2s passed by. Sharp slide turned to the attackers. 2 Fokkers immediately flipped down. Tragedy was unfolding before my eyes. The P2 began to fall on the right wing, and 2 parachutes opened near it. That's it. I didn't save it. It was shot down. Gave maximum engine throttle and began to catch up with a group of bombers, from which a pair of Kryukov repelled Messerschmitts. I had almost caught up with the group, when suddenly a Mi-109 appeared in front of my plane from above and started to tail the group of P2s. Mi-109 got under the sight. It was only necessary to bring the crosshairs a little and press the throttle. A long Q and Messer went to the water. After that, the rest of the enemy fighters went towards the shore. After landing, I asked Chuvashkin. Ostrovsky landed safely. What about his plane? No, he didn't land. That alarmed me. What could have happened? We have to ask for the settlements along the line of the supposed flight. But telephone inquiries yielded nothing. How I condemned myself for giving in to Ostrovsky's request and taking him on the flight. The next day the headquarters was informed that the pilot of the 16th Guards Regiment Nikolai Ostrovsky was buried near the village of Kubanskaya. He was caught while returning to the airfield by 2 Mi-109s, attacked and set on fire. Nikolai threw himself out of the burning airplane, but was shot by Messerschmitts while descending by parachute. Having learned about it, I made a vow to myself that now I would always shoot at Hitler's pilots escaping by parachute. Let these knights do not expect leniency. Soon after heavy air battles in the area of Myskako, there was a short lull in the air. We used it for an in-depth analysis of the actions of the squadron's pilots during the battles in the Kuban. We analysed in detail the results of each flight, critically examined how each pilot behaved in combat. We paid special attention to the reasons for the unjustified death of combat comrades, which significantly weakened the unit. I explained the advantages of intercepting bombers deep behind enemy lines, still on their flight route to the front line. This method did not give the enemy fighters the opportunity to restrain us in combat over the area of cover and guaranteed against strikes on our troops. At the review spoke Enmar Pogrebnoy, by this time the deputy commander of the regiment on the political part. Mikhail Akimovich spoke intelligently about the results of combat work, at the same time pointed out that successes in the battles generated in some pilots' arrogance and disregard for the enemy. The most experienced squadrons of fascist German fighters are acting against us, and this requires high organisation, discipline from our pilots, their constant vigilance, self-criticism in assessments. After the review, Pogrebnoy called me aside. Alexander Ivanovich, I am very concerned about Fadiev. He has great success in battles. But lately he has begun to show recklessness and disregard for the enemy. This could end badly for him. Young pilots are trying to imitate him. Your great friends. Talk to him. I've thought about it myself many times. Vadim's insolence was indeed sometimes beyond reasonable limits, and he's a squadron commander. I agree with you, Mikhail Akimovich. It's true I've already told Vadim that many times. I'll try to influence him more firmly. And soon there was a reason for a serious conversation. In one of the last sorties, Vadim's tricks almost led to his death. Coming from a combat mission, he, after landing the pilots of the group past shaving flight, almost clinging to the tops of trees. He made a vertical slide and began a complex aerobatics. Fadiev piloted skillfully. And everyone was interested, of course, to watch the virtuoso performance of the most complicated figures. But at that time a pair of Mi-109s jumped out from behind the clouds. The fascists aimed to get into the tail of Fadiev's plane. Platoon Commander Fedorov, jumping into his plane, had time to shout over the radio. Beard Messers in the tail. Fadiev obliquely flipped out of the path of the guns. Messerschmitts, having failed, dived into the clouds. After landing Fadiev, I came to him. I was so angry. "What are you doing, Vadim?" Stupidly decided to die. "Just a few more seconds, and you'd be dead." "Sasha, don't swear. I saw them in time. Well, I had a little fun." "You're acting like a merchant." In combat flight, turning on the transmitter, singing arias from operas. Recklessly sometimes chasing individual messers, abandoning the control of the group. Who needs this circus? You're the commander, you should set an example. Understood. As a friend, I promise you this won't happen again. Unfortunately, it was hard for Vadim to change himself. Although after this incident he tried to restrain himself from rash, dashing actions. In the evening we flew to the neighbouring airfield to the bombers and left at dawn to escort them. The strike of 29P2s was the beginning of the offensive of our front on Krimskaya. It began on April 29th and lasted until May 10th, 1943. The enemy began to strike the Soviet advancing troops with large groups of bombers. Our regiment was assigned important tasks to cover the ground units. In the first flight to cover the battlefield, our 8 went to the Kerch Strait. There, applying the high-speed pendulum method of patrolling, waited for the appearance of enemy bombers. I was firmly convinced that they would fly from the Crimea. The calculations were justified. Soon, by the glitter of reflected sunlight from the enemy planes determined that in our direction are bombers, gave a command to the group. From the west, a large group of bombers. "Let's meet them." Fedorov to tie up the fighters' escort, and the link attack Junkers. We're approaching. Near the Kerch Strait saw 3 echelons of U-87s, the distance between which was up to 3 kilometers. In each echelon in a tight formation of 3 9 bombers. Fedorov fulfilled his task masterfully. His link boldly attacked 10 Mi-109, accompanying bombers, and restrained them in combat. Junkers remained without fighters. This provided freedom of action for my wing. Applying Falcon Strike, threw the plane into a steep dive. The wingman followed me. Towards us stretched dozens of smoke trails from turret machine guns Junkers. Fire barrier on the way to the leading Center 9 seemed insurmountable. The gunners of 27 bombers were sending towards them more than 400 bullets per second. In 3 seconds, which was the time it took to get to the aiming distance and open fire on the lead U-87, we had to rush through the tracks. This was possible only at high speed and variable dive profile. It was necessary to create high angular velocities for the enemy gunners, disrupting accurate aiming at the fighter. The maneuver was calculated to be sure. Having broken through the bullet barrier, I shot the leading U-87 at point-blank range, and, having skipped over it, went vigorously upward to get into position for a new attack, shooting down the lead, and it was always the group commander, disrupted control and psychologically overwhelmed the enemy pilots. A repeated blow to the leading left 9 led to the disruption of the combat order of bombers. This was immediately used by the pilots of the link and shot down 3 more planes. The enemy began to panic. Dropping bombs and diving to the ground, bombers scattered began to run away in the direction of the Kerch Strait. Favourable conditions were created to destroy them one by one. But our task was different. I gave a command to my squadron. Stop pursuit. Attack the second echelon. With 27 U-87s of the second echelon repeated the same thing as with the first, breaking through the bundles of smoke trails. I shot down the leader of the Central 9, and on the second attack another U-87. My wingmen acted with courage and determination. The pilots shot down 1 bomber each. Hitler's pilots did not expect such a swift and accurate strike. Having dropped bombs on their territory, they turned to the west, and our link aimed at the third echelon of 3 9 Junkers. But those, seeing how we had dealt with the previous ones, did not try their fate and turned to the west. The task was accomplished, the bombing of our troops thwarted. Now we can pursue the fleeing bombers, but the pursuit had to stop. On the radio I heard an order. "Pokrishkin, I'm Tiger. Immediately return to Krimskaya." The enemy appeared in the air. No matter how tempting the prey was in front of us, the order is the law. Having organized the group in combat order, we took a new course. Unwillingly looking back on the way back, counted from the Kerch Strait to the station Verkhny Bakonskaya, 12 pillars of smoke. These were the downed airplanes burning on the ground. Above Krimskaya, we dispersed a group of Mi-109s. Apparently, these fighters had the purpose to shackle us in battle before the arrival of their bombers. This time we outsmarted them. While they were guarding us here, we had spoiled their charges still over the enemy territory. Our group could not go home. The patrol time was not over yet. The situation was unenviable, ammunition was used up, and there was no shift. We were patrolling at speed. Suddenly we found a large group of enemy planes coming from the Black Sea. We counted up to 50 bombers and fighters. Again the battle, and there was almost nothing to shoot with. How the rest of the ammunition came in handy. I shot down the 5th bomber. On the second attack, weapons no longer fired. The same situation was with other pilots of our group. What to do? After all, the enemy is coming to the front line. Without thinking long, I gave the command. Everyone close up tight to me. Let's go to the psychic. And here is already a link, dense, like a clenched fist. Dive on a group of bombers. Fyodorov and his teammates have fought Messerschmitts. Bombers, believing that we are going to ram, dropped bombs on their troops, and scattering the formation, fleeing to the west. We did not pursue them. There was nothing to shoot with, and fuel was running out. Here at last is the shift. Satisfied with our victories, we returned home without losses. We did a good job. We shot down more than a dozen enemy planes. But not always the interception of enemy bombers before their approach to the front line was so successful. In the next patrolling, we flew 4 of them. The forces, of course, were not enough. The offensive of our troops in the Crimea to the extreme heated up the air situation. The battles over the battlefield were fierce. This time we met 4 9U-87, covered by 8 Mi-109. The enemy group went dense column. This made it difficult to attack the leader. They are attacking bombers. Rechkalov, cover, gave the command. Hit from above knocked down the leader of the rear 9 and decided not to go to the hill, but to skip closely over the bombers and attack the group commander. This resulted in a reduction in speed. Only I shot the leading bomber as a powerful track of bullets and shells swept in front of the plane. Threw my fighter under the attacking Mi-109 and left the trace. I had no time to turn my car around, as the second Mi-109 on the left put a trace of fire in front of me. I looked back. There were a couple more Mi-109s in the tail. With a sharp turn, he jumped out of the Messerschmitts towards the trio of our fighters. Still, even single accurate attacks had an effect on the enemy pilots. Having dropped bombs, they did not storm ground targets and turned westward. After landing, I indignantly asked my wingman Stepanov, "Why didn't you cover me during the attack?" "Comrade Commander, I myself was attacked. I barely got out from under the blow to our pair. I thought you were there." "Didn't you see by the number on the plane that I wasn't there?" "A wingman shouldn't abandon the leader in combat. There's only one thing: you're excused for lack of combat experience." That's when I called for the plane's technician. In large white paint, mark the number of the plane. The 13th number must be visible far away. "It's not worth writing, Comrade Commander. They brought a new batch of machines and ordered to give you another one, with the number 100, reported Chuvashkin." "Good. Write 100 in large numbers." On May 5th, 1943, our troops completely seized the village of Krimskaya and began an offensive on the heights west of it. The weather in the morning restrained the actions of aviation. By the middle of the day, the clouds began to rise. The first to fly out on patrol was a 6-piece group consisting of my unit and a pair of Fadiev. Such a composition of the group was determined by our command, motivated by bad weather. Immediately took a course to the station Amanat to go west of Krimskaya. It was a probable route of the enemy bombers' approach. "We're going to the front line." Fadiev's pair, flying to the left, is increasingly moving away from my link to the east. This is starting to worry me. "Beard, I'm Pokrishkin, come closer. Why are you pulling away?" "I'll be right there." But I didn't have time to perform the maneuver. West of Krimskaya, exactly above my pair, Heinkel 111 appeared from the clouds. He came so close above us that it was impossible to attack. Making a slide, I would have jumped out ahead of the enemy. I should have fallen behind. But the Heinkel pilots, probably scared, dropped bombs. They jumped behind the tail of my plane, and the enemy bomber immediately dived back into the clouds. In the first moments, I decided to break through the clouds and catch the Heinkel above them. But in those seconds, I saw a group of U-87s between the cloud tiers. They were reorganizing for bombing. Junkers, prepare to attack, I gave the command. And I went along the column and began to fire at the U-87s in succession. The situation in that battle was not simple. After several attacks, to the left and right were two pairs of Mi-109s. They tried to take me in pincers. With a jerk up, and to the side I jumped out from under their blow and spun with them on turns. But the low altitude and the overhanging clouds did not give us an opportunity to transfer the battle to verticals. Stepanov helped us out. He came to the rescue in time and Messerschmitts dived into the clouds. Rekhalov's pair attacked the fleeing U-87s. After the battle, having gathered the group in combat order, we continued patrolling. Andrei Trud joined us. Recognizing him by his aircraft number, I asked him, "Where is Vadim?" "He was hit and went home. Why didn't you accompany him?" "He was constrained by the Messers, couldn't get away." The situation with Fadiev alarmed me. I had to postpone my inquiries until we landed. From the side of us, at a distance of up to 2 kilometers, appeared 6 Mi-109. They flew parallel to our group and did not engage in combat. We waited for enemy bombers and did not try to contact with fighters. In the direction of Anapa, against the background of clouds, the silhouettes of heavy airplanes were already visible. So we went from north to south and back not far from the group of Messerschmitts. Suddenly a Yak-1 jumped out west of us and went straight at me. Yak, I'm mine." I immediately warned him, but he attacked head-on and, firing, sped past. I could see well how shell casings were flying out of the ejector of his gun. One aimed shell hit the wing of my plane. Here I had no doubts that our plane was a fascist. I gave a command to my pilots to shoot down the Yak, but he managed to turn around and went to the group of Messerschmitts. After that, Messes rushed at us. We also made a turn and went head-on. Having caught the leading enemy group in the crosshairs, I shot him down with a long burst. The others immediately left. The bombers never showed up, obviously cancelled the raid. When we finished patrolling, we came to the airfield. "Fadiev sat down?" asked Chuvashkin after landing. "No, did not land." "Where is Vadim and what happened to you?" "Report." I demanded from Trud. From his story something became clear. Having broken away from my link, Vadim's pair went to Krimskaya. There they ran into a group of Mi-109s. A hot fight ensued. The pair fell apart. At one point in the battle, Trud heard Vadim. "I'm Fadiev. I'm going home." Fadiev was wounded, it was clear from his voice, and Trud could not get away from two Messerschmitts. We waited several days for news about Fadiev's fate. It became clear that Vadim was killed. After the liberation of Krimskaya, our troops fought hard for a week for the heights west of the village. This boundary allowed to go to the deep rear of the enemy's defense, to Novorossiysk. Hitlerites defended desperately. They transferred to this area all reserves and concentrated here a large air grouping. Fighting in the air was fierce. Our pilots selflessly engaged in fights with numerically superior enemy to disrupt the bombardment of our troops. In these battles, the regiment lost brave and capable squadron commanders Dmitry Koval and Mikhail Sutirin. I was also almost shot down over the Taman bridgehead. I was saved by chance. We flew out then, 4 of us, early in the morning to cover the area. In the group were pilots of the 3rd Squadron, which was left without a commander after the death of Vadim Fadiev. The wingman in my pair, I uncalculatedly assigned a young pilot with little combat experience. Approaching Krimskaya. Solid tiered clouds. Enemy aircraft could only be at high altitude. I decided to break through the clouds. My wingman had no experience of flying in difficult weather conditions. He got away from us, and the conditions did not allow to search for him and add him to the Group 9 twin-engine bombers U-8088 were coming to the front line. I gave a radio command to the wingman to go home. The three of us rushed towards the enemy. There was no time to gain altitude for a falcon strike, and the second tier of clouds interfered. At first everything was going well, as it was planned. With a combat turn, I cut into the formation of the 9. At point-blank range, a long burst, shoot the leader. Having skipped the line of bombers, I looked to the side and back. The downed U-88 was smoking in the fall. I managed to notice the other bombers nearby. Bombs were falling down from them. I made a dash to the side and again went into the attack. The bombers began to turn randomly to the west. I threw myself at a straggling U-88. He tries to get away, goes into a dive. I caught up with the Junkers and shot it down. I took the airplane out of the attack over the very top edge of the lower cloud. Further following, the U-88 threatened to collide with the ground, because the lower edge of the cloud was only 200 meters away. Having reached the altitude by a combat turn, I saw the second 9 bombers under the clouds. Without wasting time, rushed towards it. The main thing to prevent the Junkers to the front line. I attacked the right bomber in the 9. U-88 caught fire. The rest, dropping bombs on the turn, steeply turned away from the formation to the west. I'm tailing them, getting closer. Here they are near. I aim at the rightmost Junkers. He's a little behind the group. A line on the gunner, the second on the engine. Black smoke stretches behind the Junkers, but he's still flying. We have to finish it off. I press the trigger, the weapon doesn't fire. Apparently it failed. I decide to reload. And then, despite the excitement of the battle, looked in the direction of the tail of my plane. 6 Messerschmitts were already attached to me. Immediately make a vigorous turn. Traces of fire went higher. Having skipped the lower cloud cover, I brought the plane to the ground, above a populated area. I recognized it below me was the village Varenikovskaya. I entered the clouds with a slide, hiding from Messerschmitts and anti-aircraft guns, took a course to the airfield. After landing, ordered Chuvashkin. Check. For some reason, suddenly failed weapons. A few minutes later, the technician, grinning, reported. Weapons work perfectly. In the containers there is not a single shell and not a single cartridge. Yes, that's what saved me. If the weapon had fired for another 2 or 3 seconds, I wouldn't have come home today. The Messers would have finished me off, I said involuntarily. On the first downed bomber, which fell near the front line, the headquarters received confirmation of the rifle unit. It was credited to me. The second shot down deep in the enemy defences, and the third, shot down, which must have fallen later, went in favour of the overall victory. Starchikov in this battle also shot down a Junkers from the first 9. We fulfilled the combat task, did not let our troops bomb. After May 10th, the offensive at the front stopped in the air, came relative calm. The situation allowed to summarise the results of the last battles, with a report on the actions of pilots made the commander of the regiment. He mainly summarised the results by numerical indicators, how many sorties, hours of combat flying, the number of battles, shot down aircraft. It is clear that the pilots listened to these data without much interest. But in these battles, for the first time, we used a lot of novelties. And the enemy has moved to a different tactics. He began to use height and manoeuvre more boldly. It became more difficult to shoot down Messerschmitts. Everyone was waiting for the speech of Mikhail Akimovich Pogrebnoy. This political worker was able to see the main thing. He always talked to us after combat sorties. The deputy politician knew well the dynamics of the battles and the actions of each pilot in them. Pilots and technicians of the regiment were frank with Pogrebny. They respected him very much for his attentive and kind attitude, for his ability to remove the depressed mood in case of failures, to arouse deep patriotic feelings. And now he managed to draw attention to himself. Briefly recalling the successes of the regiment and personally pilots in the battles for the Crimea, Pogrebnoy among the best named Vadim Fadiv, he said, and fell silent, as if thinking or letting us remember this pilot. Everyone was quiet and waited for what he would say about Vadim. Worrying, sometimes silent, he told us about this wonderful man and an excellent air fighter, about his death. Listening to Pogrebnoy, I thought about Vadim. No one knew him as well as I did. We were connected by personal and combat friendship. Nature generously endowed Fadiv with rare physical and spiritual qualities. Inexhaustible energy and optimism, a sincere sense of camaraderie were admired by everyone. In difficult times for me, Vadim always tried to support me in word and deed. Vadim's death was the heaviest loss for me since the beginning of the war. Without belittling his virtues, I thought a lot about the true reasons that led to his death. The nature of the Volga Bogatyr, confident in his extraordinary abilities, often manifested itself in disregard for the dangers of battle, in overestimating their capabilities. I was older than Vadim, had more life and combat experience. I tried as a friend to advise and correct him, especially in matters of tactics. In the last combat flight, he, as a squadron commander, showed self-confidence, apparently decided to act independently. This was his fatal mistake. Pogrebnoy dwelled on the issues of formation of high moral and combat qualities in pilots, emphasized the need to improve tactical training. Having finished his speech, M.A. Pogrebnoy addressed the pilots. Who wants to speak? Permission? I asked. He dwelled on the fact that the main reason for the death of our pilots is patrolling in small groups, 4s at best 6. Having met large groups of enemy bombers under strong cover of Messerschmitts, our pilots, in order to disrupt the bombing, selflessly rushed to the numerically superior enemy and sometimes die in unequal fights. So were shot down Normenko, Koval, Sutirin and some others. I suggested sending patrols of 2 or 3 6s, or better 8. We must take into account the number of the regiment, said N. Zayev. We can increase the number of combat sorties for each pilot, I said, looking at the comrades. The flight crew agrees to this. In these days of calm summoned to the headquarters of the Air Army pilots, the most distinguished in the battles. The headquarters was located in the suburbs of Krasnodar, in the village Pashkovskaya. We flew there by airplanes, landed on an unfamiliar site of limited size. Only the communications squadron was based here. On landing, the landing gear leg of my U-2 got into a deep rut from a car and broke. Lieutenant Olifrenko, the squadron commander, came to the plane. Seeing that I was upset, he calmed me down. Don't worry, comrade captain. We will deliver spare parts here. We have enough of these slow-moving vehicles. We'll repair them quickly. We got to talking. Olifrenko expressed his dissatisfaction with his appointment as commander of the communications unit. He aspired to become a fighter pilot. Visibly embarrassed, he asked me, "Comrade captain, talk to the army commander about transfer to your regiment. You don't fly fighter planes, but only U-2s. Before the war, I was an instructor at the flying club. I'll learn the fighter plane quickly. Believe me, I won't let you down, comrade captain. But we can take you to the regiment only as an ordinary pilot, and you are now the commander of a separate squadron." Besides, fighter pilots often get hurt in battles, tried to dissuade Olifrenko, realizing the complexity of retraining a pilot on a combat aircraft in frontline conditions. I agreed to be an ordinary pilot, but on a fighter plane, and the danger of this profession does not scare me. Good. If I get a chance, I'll report your request to the commander and I'll petition for your transfer to us. On the way to the headquarters, listening to the conversations of the pilots travelling with me, I thought about Olifrenko. I remembered how I had been trying to become a pilot for many years. There was no need to doubt the sincerity of Olifrenko's patriotic aspirations. He understood the danger to life, but wanted to personally participate in air battles. Such a man should have been helped. We were met by the Chief of Staff of the Army, General A.Z. Ustinov. Have you arrived? The commander is still busy. Now go to the canteen of the headquarters. At breakfast we discussed the issues that had to be reported to the commander. This difficult task was entrusted to me. I understood the responsibility. Speak at such a meeting should be brief and weighty, to express the main thing that worries us, fighters. It was the first time during the war when called ordinary pilots in such a high headquarters for a business conversation. Meanwhile, combat life has long suggested that it is necessary to study and generalize combat experience to boldly seek ways of more effective use of fighters in combat conditions. We were received by General K.A. Vershinin. He had recently been appointed commander of the 4th Air Army, which united in late April all the aviation of our front. The dispersion of forces in the two armies was finally eliminated. However, the basics of its combat application remained the same. We continued to fly in small groups. Only courage and skill allowed us to win in battles superior in strength of the enemy. The slogan used at that time, "Beat the enemy not in numbers, but in numbers," was very patriotic, but did not always lead to success in battle over a numerically superior enemy. Combat pilots expected a lot from this meeting, wanted that the new in the combat application of our aviation became more actively implemented in life.
Without special introductions, K. Vershinin opened the meeting.
Let's, comrades, consult how we better beat the enemy on the ground and in the air, he said. Commander briefly outlined the air situation on our front. He dwelt on the important problems of the use of the air army. He detailed the principles of the air offensive when breaking through enemy defenses and battles in depth. He spoke about the massive use of bomber and attack aircraft. Fighters set the main task to gain air supremacy in order to ensure the actions of bombers and attack aircraft, disrupting enemy airstrikes on our ground troops. Aviation offensive was a new form of combat use of aviation in the offensive operation. It contributed to a significant increase in combat effectiveness and was a major step in the operational art of the Air Force. I cannot hide from the words of the commander, other leaders of the Air Army on the Soul became happier. We can successfully attack and drive the hated invaders from our land. The aviation is now set such difficult tasks that we could only dream of. When the speeches of aviation commanders were over, I asked for the floor. On behalf of the fighters present at the meeting, I expressed my opinion on the order limiting the speed of fighter patrols over the object of cover. I explained the disadvantages of this method, dooming us to conduct a defensive battle on horizontal maneuvers. Offensive combat using vertical maneuver is achieved only when patrols fly at high speed. Reported that the enemy bombers strike during the day with a certain periodicity. At the expected time of their raids should send a reinforced patrol of 2 or 3-8. We are now from morning to evening flying groups of 4 to 6 fighters. This composition, and we have to fight with large forces of bombers and fighters. True, this will require an increase in the combat load on each air fighter. However, pilots agree to have combat sorties per day twice as much as is established now. In his speech spoke about the advisability of intercepting enemy bombers on the route of their flight to the target to prevent strikes on our ground troops. He gave examples of intercepting my 8 large groups of enemy bombers deep behind enemy lines. Unfortunately, the destroyed equipment we do not count. In the order issued at the beginning of the war, it is established that downed enemy aircraft must be confirmed by our ground troops or recorded by a movie machine gun. How can the forward units see the air battle if we fight in 20-30 kilometers behind enemy lines? Our industry is still producing airplanes without submachine guns. For example, in the area of Moscow we had to fight over the sea, 50 kilometers west of Novorossiysk. Shooters of bombers escorted by us saw the downed enemy vehicles well, but their data do not serve as a confirmation of victory in the air battle. I asked on behalf of the fighter pilots to change this order. After listening to my speech and making notes in a notebook on the table, Vershinin said, "Comrade Pokrishkin, your speech deserves attention. Instructions will be given on these issues. Proposals on the order to shoot down aircraft will be reported to Moscow. Regarding the battles in the area of Moscow, you and the navigator of the army tomorrow to fly to the bomber regiment. Upon receipt of confirmation, we will count the downed aircraft." The meeting was over, and everyone left with confidence that our combat experience and suggestions will be taken into account. After the meeting, I turned to General Vershinin about Oliferenko. "What kind of a fighter is he? You won't have time to train him here." "At the front," said the commander. Let him go, Comrade General, to our regiment. He wants to become a fighter pilot. With such zeal, he will be a good air fighter. I'll find time to train him. Well, I'm counting on you, and I won't object to the transfer. Just be careful with him. Don't rush him into combat. Soon I returned to my plane. It had already been repaired. Olifrenko was waiting there. Everything is fine, told him. The commander gave the go-ahead. Surrender the squadron and come to the regiment. The next day, with the navigator of the army, sorted out the number of Messerschmitts and Fokkers shot down by us in the battles when escorting bombers in the area of Moskako. The data of shooters of P-2 planes were higher than our reports. Talking with the commander of the bomber regiment, I bitterly said that recently I did not save the P-2 and it was shot down. How surprised and pleased I was when I was informed that the pilot of the P-2, in order to disorient the Fokkers, imitated the fall. But he landed safely at the airfield of Jelencic. The navigator and gunner, who decided that the plane was shot down, ejected without the pilot's command with parachutes. At the bomber airfield met his classmate in FZU Semyon Pizhikov. We had not met him for more than 10 years. I managed to coordinate his transfer deputy to my squadron, and he soon arrived in our regiment.